let's switch gears a little bit and transition into, so, all of these things that you've been through, it kind of led you to take more interest, I think, into, okay, how do it's not only injuries, like it's beyond injuries, because if you try to incorporate some injury prevention stuff, some prehab stuff, you're going to make that person's performance go up.
Right.
Like you're definitely going to elevate their performance because they're just moving more efficiently or using their body more efficiently, training more efficiently, right? So that kind of led you on this journey to Hawaii definitely needs more people like you, what you're doing. But that led you eventually to open your own facility, right?
Yep.
Why don't you talk about that transition from, after you finished playing in 2010, kind of the experiences you gained and then eventually like saying, I'm going to take this leap of faith and let's do this to help these local players.
I got done in 2010, and I think I was having a bit of an identity crisis. Former athlete. Now I'm faced with the reality of like you're not going to be playing a sport anymore, guy. You're not, and by the time I was done, I was 24 years old, where most people at that time are like well established in the workforce at that point. So I'm kind of like, I don't know what I want to do. I don't know what I'm going to do. And fortunately, I had, I went down to see my physical therapist, Pat, at Sports Med, and he was like, hey, what we're kind of talking about earlier. Hey, I think there's a need and a niche for, I'm not a clinician. I'm not a PT. I'm not a PTA. But he was like, I think there is a market, or I think there is a niche for, somebody who really understands throwing. Somebody who really understands the ins and outs of what rehab looks like and what it should look like, and helping with some of this throwing technical stuff. So he kind of brought me on as like a throwing analyst, and that's where it kind of started. Was taking a look at some of these kids after they get the green light from orthopedic surgeon or whoever or the pediatrician. Taking a look at how they're moving and then making necessary adjustments to be like, okay, I could kind of see, you can't really like point one thing to an injury, but you can kind of extrapolate some things with like, hey, I think your feet are kind of moving a little bit weird. Oh, I think your hips are moving a little bit weird. Let's try and adjust some of these things before you actually start getting back on the field. And then let's see what your throwing looks like and see if we can get it pain-free. So I did that for 5 years, and then right? It's just the grind of, 8 o'clock to, 7 o'clock and, having late nights and just feeling absolutely exhausted after work. So I'm like, you know what, man, this is something that I think, for how I like to live my life. And, I was 29. And I think at that point I kind of figured out like, this is how I like to live my life. I like to do these kinds of things, I think what I have envisioned in my own head would help contribute to how I like to live my life. At the time I didn't have kids yet. I have one now, but it was something where I knew that I wanted to be home, for, if I can't be home at, after work, let me be at home before work where I can still interact with, with my child or, my parents or whoever. That's what I appreciated. And so, with a leap of faith and some, help from my parents, that's where Pitching Performance Hawaii got started in 2016. So been kind of at it for a while. And right before COVID, I was fortunate enough to move to a bigger location, but then that's when the world almost fell apart.
Everything got turned upside down. But no, it's good to hear because, if you think about it too, all of these things that you went through, if one of these things didn't happen, you might not even be down this path, right? So, and Hawaii definitely needs this. We were just talking about it before we started recording, but there were many times when, and we have good people that we're talking to too. We mentioned Kurt Watanabe, right? But there are times when like this is way beyond rehab, like or strength and conditioning even. Like I can get you super strong, mechanically do everything, but if you keep throwing like that, you're just going to be right back in here. You kind of mentioned that too, is that was a cycle that I think we all see in Hawaii. It's like, oh, you get injured or get some kind of issue, problem. And then after that, you go rehab for a little bit, but you don't bridge that gap. You go back to play again. And that cycle just kind of repeats,
right? And I think it's a very like Hawaii, California, Texas, Florida problem, right? Because it never gets cold.
Yeah.
And so because it never gets cold, there's technically no real off season.
Yes.
When you're having to deal with, like having to throw outside when it's 50 degrees, like nobody wants to do that, you know? So I think it is a very warm weather problem.
No.
And again, it's because it never ends. That's kind of what compounds the problem. Yeah. Because there's no real true off season, technique flaws that were semi red flags in January. September now it's awful because of fatigue, because of whatever it is.